This week, we have a new Hedera council member that represents the largest energy companies on the planet. We also have some exciting AI and DeFi updates, an exclusive HBAR ETF interview, and much more. Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, here once again to bring you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So we're going to start off with that new council member. And we've had two new council members just over the past few weeks. The latest announcement was just a couple days ago with Blockchain for Energy. Over a year ago, we highlighted that Hedera joined the B4E group of massive organizations, and now the roles are reversed. They're joining our group. Blockchain for Energy is a consortium of large energy industry players, including Chevron, Exxon, SLB, formerly Schlumberger, and ConocoPhillips. Just so happens I've worked for two of those companies, and I've worked with all of them. So one of the interesting things around Blockchain for Energy is it's blockchain for energy, but the only layer one that's involved actually isn't a blockchain at all, Hedera. That said, there is another Hedera builder involved, Tollum Earth. B4E provides a secure environment for energy stakeholders to collaborate on blockchain-powered solutions that streamline workflows and strengthen environmental performance. We learned last year that one of the consortium members, EQTY, a global leader in thermal energy, was using B4E Carbon as part of a power purchase agreement with a major Texas utility company. EQTY Energy uses B4E Carbon to manage carbon-negative geothermal power generation while setting a new standard for environmental claims management and carbon credit monetization. And you guessed it, B4E Carbon is underpinned by Hedera. Rebecca Hoffman, president and CEO of Blockchain for Energy, said, "Joining the Hedera Council is a pivotal step in advancing our vision for a high-integrity, trusted emissions reporting ecosystem. Through our B4E Carbon platform, a secure, auditable, and decentralized DMRV solution, we're setting up a new benchmark for sustainability data across the energy value chain, built for operators, backed by data, validated by results. Together with Hedera, we're committed to raising industry standards, eliminating greenwashing risks, and delivering trusted sustainability outcomes that our stakeholders and communities can rely on." The Hedera Council Memcom chairman Simon Olson said, "One of the barriers to widespread enterprise adoption of blockchain technology is the lack of standardization. By forming a consortium to promulgate uniform standards, Blockchain for Energy can help overcome persistent problems that have plagued the energy industry, such as how to track seismic data." I do want to report that B4E Carbon is not the only initiative that's being explored by the consortium and the consortium members. Some of the consortium members are looking at ways at leveraging the Hedera network as well. So exciting stuff, a lot to learn, a lot to dig into. But I got another question around Saudi Aramco, because last year I reported that Saudi Aramco is part of this consortium. But if you look at their website now, you don't see Saudi Aramco there. So I'm trying to figure out if they are actually part of the consortium or if they've moved on for some reason. But either way, we have all of these other huge energy partners that can bring Hedera forward in absolutely new ways. The next thing we're going to jump into is the HBAR ETF. I got an exclusive interview with Gregg Bell. He's the Chief Business Officer at the Hedera Foundation for some exciting updates. So, Gregg, we've seen that you're making the rounds. We've seen you on various media outlets out there spreading the good word about Hedera and the HBAR. We appreciate you coming on here today. Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. There's a lot to talk about in the ecosystem. And so, part of our job is to amplify the awareness and happy to do so. It's a lot of fun.
Well, hopefully we can do that a little bit today. So a couple weeks ago, Gregg, just to jump right into it, the SEC requested comments from the public on the Canary Capital HBAR ETF. From your perspective, how's the process going and what are your expectations around approval and launch?
Gosh, I think the process has been one that is following a sort of well-trodden path, right? And we've all seen what that path looked like for Bitcoin. I know some of your prior, interviewees, the team from Bloomberg, right, Eric and James, who provide some fantastic updates on the overall process. But we now have the two filings, the S1s, one from Canary, one from Grayscale. The 19B4 was filed back in February. And then there's been, acknowledgement of that 19B4. It sort of follows this train track. Once the acknowledgement occurs, there's a final deadline, I believe, for for the Canary filing, which was the first. It's into November of this year. And they put out the odds. So, of what I've seen was most recent odds at approval within the calendar year of 90% or greater. And so, that looks quite promising. I think you add to that some of the attributes around the way that, there are CFTC regulated futures. They have a column that says, does the SEC currently view as commodity? Likely yes. And so I think those are all leading in the right direction. And then we saw, January 6th, VanEck, 21 shares, and Canary, they jointly sent a letter to the SEC. It was sent to, Chairman Paul Atkins, and it was urging them to return to this, decades-long process of first to file, first to approval. And I think that's very beneficial for Hedera and for HBAR because of the fact that the Canary filing was so early in the overall adoption of ETF filings. And so, if there is a change of the way that the Bitcoin was approved, where everything was done simultaneously, this would be reverting back to that norm. That letter was signed by John VanEck, by the CEO of VanEck, by Stephen McClurg, the CEO of Canary, and by Duncan Muir, president of 21 Shares. And of course, Duncan was previously at Aberdeen, so one of the governing council members and knows the Hedera ecosystem better than most. I think it's really promising and exciting, and there's increased momentum. So I'm pretty optimistic.
Yeah, we heard great things from Duncan about how there is people asking about the HBAR ETF, and that's why they actually moved forward with bringing that to market. Now, I was speaking to the issuer of the first international HBAR-backed ETP, Valor, a few weeks ago. I hadn't looked in a while, but I was pleasantly surprised that their HBAR-backed products now have 8 figures in assets under management. As we mentioned, 21 Shares is going to be launching a similar product, but the U.S. products could be even more impactful. What are your thoughts on potential inflows that could result from these products?
I mean, Valor was a true pioneer in the space in terms of finding the geographic locations throughout the world that were able to onboard ETPs and did so very, very early. And they did so on a regional exchange that maybe is lesser known. And so, they've been growing, which is fantastic, of course, to see. I think there's going to be more and more regional distribution channels of various securities markets and exchanges. And, that will grow beyond the German market where many of the ETPs are today. And of course, the ETP is sort of the European version of the US ETF product. And so I would expect to see cross listings. I'd expect to see these assets become available in some of the jurisdictions that just are harder to gain access to, or those that simply can't access US markets or European markets. And so in the Middle East, in Dubai, and pockets in Latam and Asia and throughout Europe. And so there is certainly opportunity to speak to captivated smaller markets. And, these ETPs, I think, are really efficient to gain access to HBAR without having to worry about the custody requirements and other components and knowledge related to the cryptocurrency ecosystem. You can just go directly through your broker or buy these assets with legacy rails. And so I'm quite favorable in terms of the adoption flows that will happen as they become more and more options for investors. The US, of course, is the biggest, right? And so the US has multiples in terms of the capital. And so as the US comes on board, it also drives awareness. Part of it is accessibility, and then part of it is awareness. And so I think there will be a big marketing component as these products become available in the US.
Fantastic point. Now, as we've discussed in the past, basketed crypto ETFs have tremendous potential as well. And with HBAR being considered what they say a US crypto, because there's a lot of our entities that are focused here, we're also a top 25 token or a layer 1. And with this likely standalone ETF, it would seem to be primed to be included in many of these indexed products. What are your thoughts on the potential impact of these basketed type ETFs?
Well, it's already, I mean, to your point, it's already included in these basket type products in the crypto space. Mm-hmm. And so there's no reason to believe that there won't be, Hedera inclusion within ETFs as the basket products come to market. And I do think they're compelling, right? I mean, the percentage of the overall market that utilizes ETFs for tracking bond indices, the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ 100 is significant. Last I checked is something around 15% of the market, I think, is through these. And similarly, Bitcoin, we've got the Bitcoin ETFs. Those, I think, are around 6% of the overall market cap is now being held in the ETF products. And so I think that there's several different narratives that are beneficial. So if you're constructing a US basket, or you're constructing a top 20 basket, or you're constructing a basket that is specific to financial infrastructure or tokenization, Hedera fits very well within a lot of these narratives. And that's where passive investing, index investing really has been something that for the last generation or two, you've seen more and more influence. And so that certainly is a benefit.
Well, one of the things that, I've been looking at is the fact that Bitcoin has had that tailwind of having those ETFs in the market for some time. And I think that can attribute some of the outperformance of Bitcoin. Now, we've had the ETH ETFs in the market as well, but I think ETH has had some other issues it's been contending with. Do you think that these altcoins that are going to be getting the ETFs, do you think they're going to be lackluster, or do you think that there is demand for those type of products?
I think there's absolutely demand. And a lot of it comes around the narratives, right? I mean, Ethereum has had scaling challenges that have been these scaling debates for a variety number of years now. And that's why you see a whole bunch of different altcoins that have come and said, all right, we specialize in scalability. Well, Hedera have proven scalability rather than just saying it, right? And so I think that there is the technology narrative that you can look at Hedera and say, all right, it's the greenest. It has, fixed and affordable fee structure. It has the throughput that is required from its institutions. It has the proven scalability. And then you compound that with the brands that ultimately operate Hedera. And these are brands that a whole generation of people are familiar with that may be new to crypto, but if they're trying to gain exposure and they're sitting there and saying, well, I can get exposure to something that I really don't understand over here, or I can gain exposure to the protocol that is being run by Google and IBM and Nomura and Aberdeen, Mondelez and Dell. Okay, these are technology financial giants, corporate giants. And if Fortune 500 picks a chain, they're picking Hedera, that alone says enough. And, I should be paying attention to this asset. And so I think that there is a lot of positive momentum when it comes to the Hedera story.
And I think that a lot of the investors that are going to be gaining access through these kind of products, they're used to doing research. And as they go down that rabbit hole, they're going to find things like the Carnegie Mellon COQ proof that was done for the ABFT security on Hedera, or the University College London study that found that Hedera, like you mentioned, is the greenest on earth. And then, of course, going down the rabbit hole of the council itself and how they're involved in the things that they're building. I think that's a good path for those people that might be a little... Go ahead.
It fits within, a technology vertical that already exists with a lot of traditional asset managers and advisors that are making allocation decisions for their clients.
Well said, and well covered. So, Gregg, we know that you're not just focused on ETFs there at the foundation. What else has you excited?
Gosh, ETFs, ETPs really are just taking a digital asset and wrapping it in the traditional format. That's one direction. The other direction is tokenization, taking, securities and bringing them on chain. And that is an area that there is massive growth. If you believe, as I do, the way Larry Fink is saying, everything in the world is going to be tokenized from a financial products perspective. There are certain protocols and certain needs that institutions require to be able to really adopt new technology. They need the scalability. They need the uptime. They need to have the ability to budget accordingly. Like, fees for transactions and securities can't be subject to 2,000% changes over any given moment because of a transaction or volumes that are occurring on the other side of the world, because there's a meme coin drop or an NFT that's really gaining excitement, and now there's congestion that also correlates with downtime. So it's the scalability and then the collateral mobility story is one that is a lot of people are talking about, that also relies on sort of the throughput of the network. So there's a whole bunch of different components. When you add to that the regulatory compliance, the fact that Hedera is OFAC or sanctions compliant, that removes a whole nother risk factor that an institution has to overcome in order to say, I'm going to utilize this technology. Because corporate risk that everybody is taking on here, that says, all right, am I going to enable this technology or not? And the more that you can, check the right boxes, the easier that adoption is. And so there's lots of those conversations ongoing. There's lots of tokenization that I will expect to see, and more innovation. So it's not just, hey, this is a new distribution avenue, but here's something that can be done by embedding a smart contract to create automation, to create more efficient markets, to create higher yields, less risk to the underlying system, greater transparency. All that's coming, and that's to me really exciting.
Well, it's following the progression that I would expect. We had the initial proof of concepts around, NFTs or just straight up DeFi and DEXs, and that moved to commodities exchanges. We had Verto and the Digital Commodities Exchange, both built on Hedera. And now we're seeing KDX, the Kenyan Digital Exchange. Of course, that's going to take some time to come to fruition, but that's one of the Hedera governing council members, the Nairobi Securities Exchange, which is actually doing that. But it's following that progression that you would expect to eventually have the proof of concept for the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ and the Texas Stock Exchange, the FTSE and so forth. So, when I look at Hedera, I like the path that we're going down, becoming those new financial rails for pretty much everything in the traditional financial space.
There is a world of opportunity. We're only scratching the surface.
Well said. Gregg, is there anything else you'd like to cover before we let you go?
Gosh, we could keep on talking for hours. We didn't even talk about AI, and to me, that's one of the biggest, most exciting areas. Do
it up. Absolutely.
You get to robo-advisors being able to utilize now the ELYSA OS plugin, which is one of the core operating systems for AI. And so Hedera plugins exist for ELYSA OS. And so that's more of the progression from Talk to Me, which is the way most people interact with AI today, right? Whether it's through ChatGPT or otherwise, or a prompt, an LLM, communicating, let's talk to me. Maybe that's by X or some other platform. But it's moving from talk to me to do this for me, buy this for me, generate this for me. That requires these operating systems that can actually connect, and then the rails by which the operating systems will ultimately execute. It's a different advertising campaign. You're not advertising to an individual saying, "Hey, utilize this because the brand is there." No, an operating system will look and see what is the uptime, what is the cheapest cost, what's the fastest throughput. Though that's a ground of a battle that Hedera will perform extremely well on all those metrics. So it's exciting.
Yeah, the agents aren't gonna have those crypto biases that we see all the time in the space, the tribalism, all that kind of stuff. They're just gonna say, what is the platform that's best for what I need to do?
And as more of the crypto exchanges start to engage in securities, which they all are seeking to, follow the models of many of the broker dealers in the US that have now, both crypto and securities, only gonna further move the needle in terms of the adoption.
Couldn't agree more, Gregg. We appreciate you taking the time to come on here today. And I know you're working on a lot of different things. So as you get more things going, you move down your roadmap, you're always welcome back.
Appreciate it.
So the HBAR and alt markets have been pretty rocky lately, and that's never easy to deal with. But I really truly believe that these US alt ETFs are going to be the driver for the next leg of the bull market. And with HBAR and Hedera being one of the first to get one of these ETFs, they're going to be in a great position to get exposure to a whole new class of investor. We've talked about this a fair amount in the past few weeks, but Hedera is going to resonate with that new type of investor who may not have invested through a centralized exchange and certainly not with DeFi. But if they can get exposure through their brokerage firm, they're going to be all about that. All right, now moving on. Like every week, we had a ton of other Hedera news, which I'll pepper in between these interviews. First, Coinbase integrated into Hashpack. Coinbase posted, "We're excited to announce Hashpack app, a leading wallet for the Hedera ecosystem, has integrated Coinbase on-ramp, enabling users to seamlessly convert fiat to HBAR directly inside the app. Hashpack makes it easy for users to store, stake, and swap HBAR, Hedera tokens, and NFTs." So a huge congratulations to both Coinbase and Hashpack here. We can see that Coinbase is becoming much more closely in line with things that Hedera are doing. We had that interview with Lincoln from Coinbase this past Tuesday talking about their new standard X402, which Jay Cool from Hashgraph jumped all over to make sure that Hedera had integration. But what I'm seeing is a big difference from what we saw under the previous regime at the Hedera Foundation. At the time, it seemed like the relationship between Coinbase and the HBAR Foundation at the time was pretty frosty. That has obviously thawed a lot. So I think things that we expect to see are going to be coming in short order. So an example of that is going to be support for the Hedera version of USDC. The next thing that I want to highlight is Zep noticed that there was a new company included in the EQTY Labs website, who, as we've said countless times, is embedding Hedera technology into both Intel and NVIDIA chips. The company that he noticed was Palantir Technologies. For anyone that doesn't know, Palantir Technologies is a software and data analytics company that builds platforms for large-scale data integration, analysis, and decision-making, mostly for governments, defense, and enterprise. Leveraging AI, Palantir is one of the fastest growing companies whose market cap has done a 10x in the past couple years. Certainly a good customer for EQTY Lab to have. There's also tons going on in the Hedera DeFi space. First, Hedera has integrated with a platform called Orbit, a new all-in-one DeFi platform. The team at Orbit identified some gaps in the Hedera DeFi space and has been heads down in recent months working to fill them. It'll include a connected trading dashboard, instant order execution with limit support, real-time token audits, portfolio tracking tied to a non-custodial wallet, and precision tools for taking advantage of new launches. Now, I haven't gotten in touch with them yet, but in weeks to come, I'm going to try to get an interview with this team. We also saw announcements from Bonzo on their vaults, Etaswap for their USDC swaps, and some tokens grabbing attention with the Wild Tigers NFT project. Now, there was some drama around that. I was trying to listen to a space to get some facts on it last night, but I couldn't figure out exactly what happened. So if you know what happened, go ahead and drop those down in the comments. And in the meantime, I'm going to try to get a hold of Maui to see if I can get a full description as well. And there was another token, Bitcoin.HBAR, that was also tearing up the chart. But on all of these DeFi topics, we're going to try to do a much deeper dive on Sunday when we get Brady back for another DeFi Corner. So certainly tune back in for that one. But in the meantime, I have another interview that I've been trying to get for a while with Hedera's top DEX, and it's a pretty good one. So today we welcome Peter. He is the CEO of the premier DEX on Hedera, Saucerswap. Peter, thanks for jumping on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Brandon.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure. Now, it's been a little while since we've had you on before. Can you tell us just a bit about yourself and what brought you to Hedera and Saucerswap?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Peter Campbell. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Saucerswap Labs. I got into Hedera the same way a lot of people did. I bought some HBAR back in, I think, 2021. I started digging into the tech, watched all the Lehman Baird talks. Shout out to the Harvard lecture. I think that was like the turning point for a lot of people, and just got into the rabbit hole. Then I got really deep into it. My background is not in tech or finance. I actually studied music composition in my undergrad and then did film directing at Columbia for my master's. So not the usual path, but I think it actually helped. Working in creative fields, you get used to thinking about the audience and the user and how it feels, what expectations they have, how you can guide expectations. And I think that's actually helped a lot with product. So since we launched Saucerswap, I've been kind of obsessive about the user experience and trying to make sure that what we build works for our user and that it feels intuitive. So we launched Saucerswap about 3 years ago. It was August of 2022. And that basically kicked off DeFi on Hedera. Since then, we have worked with, the greats like Hashpack, Dovu, Galaxy, Karate Combat. There's a lot to name. And honestly, we wouldn't be here without the folks at Hashgraph, the Hedera Foundation, the Hashgraph Association. So want to give them due credit. They have done a lot of heavy lifting and have shaped Hedera DeFi to what it is today.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the journey for Saucerswap itself and, what you can attribute the success to becoming that number one DEX on Hedera. Why do you think you guys have been so successful?
A large part of it was being at the right place at the right time. We launched when there was no DeFi ecosystem. So there was certainly a component of just being the first mover on the network. But since then, we've just been keeping our heads down and building. From day one, it's been about execution. We have seen kind of like the pitfalls of DeFi on other networks where it's like a fast burning candle. So we're trying to have no fluff, no hype, just ship features and value that brings, real utility to the ecosystem and the community. We're also super picky internally about quality. So if we're going to launch something, we want it to actually move the needle. We don't roll out features just for the sake of it. We try to stay focused on what our users actually want and will use. And that's all been super important, like internally, but it is an ecosystem. And honestly, a big part of the growth is the interconnectedness of the various projects. So Hashpack gets 95% of the accounts, like the wallet activity, right? And they made onboarding super easy. And that is so valuable. Hedera gave us a network that is actually fast and reliable and performant. And the foundation has been instrumental in, especially recently, bringing on the projects that we need to grow the ecosystem from here. So I think we'll probably get into that in the next question. But that's been the journey so far.
Well, that is a perfect segue into the next question. What else does the Hedera DeFi space need? Both things that, the Saucerswap team can help with, and then things that might require other teams and talent.
Yeah, so a few things. I think number one is still interoperability. We need more cross-chain liquidity, and we need more and better ways to move assets in and out of the network. We are working on that through a governance proposal right now with Bonzo Finance Labs for V2 layer zero pools. So we have a governance request for comment on our forum. It's gov.saucerswap.finance. And it's for wrapped ETH and wrapped Bitcoin version 2 concentrated liquidity pools. So go check that out. I think that will be big. Aside from interoperability, I think the other big thing is what's natively being built on the network. I think we need to see more tokens launching natively on Hedera. That's what drives volume, activity, new users, the whole flywheel that we're targeting. If you just go on, for example, like Jupiter on Solana, like the amount of tokens they launch is ridiculous. It happens like several times a minute. We've seen hints of that before. Early Saucerswap days, we saw a bunch of tokens launching. The memejob.fun run had a bunch of tokens launching. And then Hashpack rolled out their in-wallet token creator. That helped a lot. But so far, it has not been the consistency that we need. So right now, we are seeing signs of that picking up. I don't know if you saw or covered the Libra Capital showing up on DeFi Llama. I think it was like 3 days ago.
Not yet, no.
Yeah, so that one's pretty interesting. They're working on fund issuance and distribution, which is good news for RWAs. By the way, they showed up on the Hedera dashboard on DeFi Llama. They're already on other networks. I think they have like 100 million in TVL across all the networks. So I think the vision is that we need a mix of assets on the network. We need those blue chip assets in ample liquidity coming from bridges onto Hedera. We need real world assets either coming from other networks or being launched natively on the network. And meme coins. We need the whole lot. And the vision for us is to have a fluid layer where all of those different sectors can interface in a permissionless environment where users can trade meme coins and RWAs and blue chip assets, and for it to be that connective tissue that kind of lets all of those systems interact.
Really well covered. I do love some of the tokens that we have in our space and some new ones that are coming out. I think that Sealcoin that's going to be dropping, Circle of Games. We have some really good tokens that are coming. All the stuff that's going to be built on Up Layer 2 alongside Karate Combat. I think those are all good ones. But you have a good point. There are some other ecosystems out there that are far larger, and we need to compete on that front as well. But you mentioned RWAs, and that's a place where Hedera could see, a leg up in a lot of places, considering what we're seeing in refi and some of the other traditional spaces. Is there any feedback as far as what we're seeing in the regulatory environment? Could those things actually be traded on something like Saucerswap?
I think so. I mean, there's still not that clarity that we need around RWAs, but the Genius Act passing, for example, is a step in the right direction, I think. There is that question around, can you trade regulated assets on a permissionless DEX? And it's still not answered, but it seems like the direction is that the issuance and like the remittance, et cetera, of regulated assets is where you basically gatekeep, and you can have permissionless trading environments. That is kind of what we're tracking, and we can get into this later, but we have this ERC20 wrapper that should help interface with regulated assets as well.
So I am curious because Hedera does have the ability to KYC the accounts themselves, so the ones that would be trading. So if something like Saucerswap were to just flag and make sure that the KYC had been done on the account, I could see how that could work. The solutions are out there. We just need to find them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a question I actually got for Shark Bites, but I thought it would be actually better for you. Now, Saucerswap has done a fantastic job. It really, from what I've seen, it's really all we need, but we've had other DEXs launch on the Hedera network, and they've just struggled to get the TVL that we've seen with Saucerswap. Do you think that we need another DEX that is more of a competitor for Saucerswap that has similar kinds of TVL?
So it's a nuanced question. And my answer is, if that DEX brings in new capital and new users, absolutely. That's good for everyone. That's good for Saucerswap. If it's just slicing up the same pie,
sure,
not so much. I think overall competition in any market is healthy, but we want to make sure that we're not just, fragmenting what value we already have and we're building new value. We've been looking at certain metrics on the network and, trying to track why specifically is Hedera not performing like other DeFi ecosystems. And the one metric we keep coming back to is capital velocity. More players in the space, if they're building seriously, can help with capital velocity. And we actually tracked basically liquidity and volume and capital velocity, and it's about an order of magnitude below some other networks. That screams opportunity to us. We are not worried about other DEXs coming online. The network needs more options, users having more avenues to explore, different projects, different utilities, more tokens. That's a good thing. And I think it'll be up to the market to figure out where value flows. From our side, we're just going to keep building and let our work speak for itself.
I think that's a good strategy. It's been working to this point. So what's next for Saucerswap? Do you have any new features that you'd like to highlight?
We have a ton, and it's kind of frustrating right now because we have so many features in development and they're all kind of like nearing production at the same time. But to give like a really quick overview, we are, first of all, rolling out a full website rebuild. It's not just visual. It's not like a facelift of the website. It's architectural. And one of the big upgrades, and I think you'll appreciate this one, is real-time pricing. So right now we have per minute pricing is the lowest interval. And basically all of Hedera DeFi runs on that per minute price data. We have gathered more information about projects using our API. It is, believe it or not, over 60 projects use the Saucerswap API. And that per minute price data is the highest fidelity data that we have. Now, if you're thinking about the performance of the Hedera network, there's like a dissonance there between the performance of Hashgraph, the Hedera network, and that per minute price data. So we're moving to per second price updates. We'll be able to build candles in real time at a really high fidelity as they happen. And that kind of responsiveness, going back to how can we make the network competitive, users expect that now, especially when they're coming from places like Solana where things feel snappier, even if, the actual network performance isn't better. So I think that that update is going to do some heavy lifting. Another one is we're almost done with our mobile application. That includes a built-in wallet. And I want to make something very clear about the wallet. There's been some discussion around this. I saw this is in no way meant to compete with Hashpack or any of the other wallet providers on the network. Hashpack in particular has been our main partner from day one. But if you go in the App Store and you look at what DEXs have mobile apps like Uniswap and Jupiter, they build in a wallet into their app. And you have to do this. There's just no way around it. You have to do it to meet the App Store guidelines. So if we could have done, an integration with Hashpack directly, that would have been our first option, but we couldn't. So we're building our own wallet. And that app is coming both to iOS and Android. And we did release some wireframes. We actually have the designs coming in. I think it looks awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited about that feature. Last thing is, just because we talked about this before, we have an ERC20 wrapper. It's going for audit now. That's going to help smooth out the friction between ERC20 assets that either launch natively or come through bridges onto Hedera so they can interface with the Hedera token service through our smart contracts. The goal is to reduce liquidity fragmentation and try to avoid like two different token standards on the network. If I had to bet, I think mobile app real-time pricing are the next two things to come out.
So, Peter, one of the other things that I heard about was that Saucerswap is looking at trying to mimic limit orders. And of course, for people that are used to traditional exchanges and centralized exchanges, that'll be more native for them. So are you looking at doing something like that? I could certainly see it being useful in the future. When might something like that come to market?
Yeah, we are developing that feature, and the architecture that we are designing for it allows for a number of use cases, actually. So there's a lot of latitude built in, but three things that is in the acceptance criteria for the initial launch is limit orders, stop loss orders, and dollar cost averaging. So those are the first three things to come online. Again, the architecture does allow for more. And once we launch those first three, we can get into the kind of extensibility of it.
All right, Peter. Well, this has been a great talk. I wish you the greatest success. You've had so much success to this point. I know that that's going to continue. Thanks for coming on today, and good luck.
Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to move from DeFi into gaming. We saw a new gaming integration announced by the Hedera Foundation with an entity called Tashi. Tashi is designed to revolutionize multiplayer gaming by eliminating centralized servers and enabling peer-to-peer gaming sessions. Tokenized game assets will live in a Hedera smart contract that's portable, verifiable, with predictable costs, as always on Hedera. Tashi creates a real-time peer-to-peer mesh where every player's machine helps power a gaming decentralized physical infrastructure, or DPIN. Nodes sync inputs, verify state, and keeps games going, all with the minimal latency and high throughput that accommodates thousands of actions per second. Together, Tashi and Hedera give developers everything they need to build real-time multiplayer games without any Web3 learning curve. It's part of Tashi's goal to add absolutely no friction for both players and devs. We also have a new game coming to Hedera from the multi-chain team CoinFantasy. CoinFantasy is as much about crypto investment education as it is about gaming and having fun. To play the game, all you have to do is register, choose your game, like Coin League HODL Play or Coin League HODL Twist, making sure the upcoming game isn't full. Then choose the coins to make up your custom portfolio. Once that portfolio is nailed down and the game starts, the best performance wins. After the game, the rewards are deposited in your wallet, and it's as simple as that. We've actually already had some successful HBAR variants with 3 of the top 15 users from the Hedera ecosystem, and Hedera Hawks won overall. Hedera Hawks' top picks were Hedera tokens Dovu, Jam, and Sauce. Now we're going to move over to the developer front. First, Jay, who, as I mentioned, we had a great interview with on Tuesday, highlighted that Hedera is second only behind Ethereum in the number of core developers. Obviously, this is great to see. And maybe not core, but a very important developer is Michael Cantor, and we caught up with him to talk about the launch of ConvAI on Hedera mainnet. Today, we have one of the hardest working people in the Hedera ecosystem. He's also the president of Hashgraph Online, as well as several other things. Michael, thanks for hopping on.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate you, as always, bringing us on to the show. Yeah, really, really excited to be here today.
Well, to kick this off, why don't you just give us a quick recap on what ConvAI is?
Yeah, so OpenConvey is essentially a AI to AI communication standard. What it enables is, number one, first and foremost, you have an AI agent, I have an AI agent, maybe I have a robot, maybe you have a robot, maybe you're a person, maybe I'm a person, and we register inside of the OpenConvey registry. And this is a decentralized registry where anyone can find us, discover us, connect, and have a conversation. Our accounts are essentially just Hedera entities. So anything that runs a Hedera entity can join this registry and be discovered. That's why I alluded to, well, it could be a robot, it could be a person, it could be anything really. As long as you have a private key to an account and you can run and respond to queries, it could be a browser or it could be inside of a agent application, then you're able to join this registry. And we utilize Hedera native services to accomplish everything inside of OpenConvey. So you have these profiles, which uses our standard HCS11 actually, where you define your name, your description, your bio, and what your capabilities are if you're an AI agent or if you're an MCP server. That's defined inside of these profiles. So through these profiles, through the registry, you can now discover agents, MCP servers, humans, robots, etc. So I might be looking for an MCP server that's really good at handling certain kinds of transactions or providing weather data. Or I might be looking for an AI agent that's a generalist that can do everything and anything and point me to the right person. You have these different kinds of capabilities that you've defined within this registry, and you create this discoverability mechanism and flywheel effect. Through OpenConvey, which we've most recently pushed into mainnet's first implementation through Moonscape, you can now register your agent and utilize a mainnet for the first time.
So that was the big news that came out this week, was that you've actually moved to mainnet. What else do we need to know about that?
Yeah, so mainnet is officially live. You can use it as of now. It's more of a soft launch. Our big focus right now is bringing on teams, MCP servers, agents, and having them register in the registry. Right now is the moment where we can bring everyone on board and make them discoverable and built on top of Hedera directly. In addition to this registry, you can go and find these different agents and have conversations with them. This is entirely what it looks like. And if it's an agent or an MCP server, you'll have a different label inside the registry. But make no mistake, this is all stored on the Hedera consensus service. There also is a Moonscape points leaderboard. And the Moonscape points leaderboard is an opportunity for you to show up on this leaderboard through your efforts. So you can collect points by essentially engaging with the ecosystem. And it's all based on on-chain activity. It's not necessarily based on what you do inside of the portal. As long as you are implementing the HCS10 standard, you're creating the right topics, you're starting conversations, and you are being a good actor, where you have these high quality engagements, then you will be able to collect these points and show up in the leaderboard. So it's a fun way to get involved as well. And you can kind of use that as a means of discovery as well. If you're creating an AI agent or an MCP server, this is a great way to be discovered and show up at the top of the leaderboard, right? So that people can find you. Additionally, inside of the agents directory, there is a rating and review system. So ideally, if you've got great ratings and users have found value in your AI agent, or maybe just talking to you as a person, then you would show up at the top of the directory. And that's another way and another outlet to kind of plug back into the point side of it. So that's all live today, and you're able to start getting involved. The big thing kind of centers around the open source side of it and actually providing value within the ecosystem. So from Hashgraph Online side, we've also been helping out with creating a new Hedera agent kit. And as part of that Hedera agent kit, you have the capability to do these human in the loop kind of conversations. So as part of the portal, we are building on top of the new Hedera agent kit. And one of the capabilities of the Hedera agent kit is being able to provide these human in the loop flows. So it's one thing to have an autonomous agent that's using an agent kit and it's just doing stuff. And what that kind of means is, by definition, your agent has a private key and it has HBAR in its account. And it's able to execute transactions. You tell the agent, okay, I want you to go and swap this token to this token through this smart contract. It does that using its own wallet and its own balance. That's good for very limited use cases, right? If you kind of think about it. But that's the agent's wallet. It's not your wallet as a user. And if you're talking about a decentralized chat experience like Mintscape, it probably won't be applicable for 90% of things that you want to do. So with the human in the loop flows, as a user, you might ask your agent, okay, I want to send one HBAR to account 800. I don't want to go into an interface, click all the buttons, or figure out how a network works. I just want to go and do it through natural language. So you give that natural language query, and then the agent goes and executes that query for you, and they give you the transaction bytes. So you didn't have to figure anything out. You just click a button, boom, you're done. Let's say you have a more complicated example, like you want to create a token, right? And you say, I want to create a token called agents that has 100 supply. With the human in the loop flows and the new Hedera agent kit, one of the things that we did is we created inferences. So basically, it'll read your prompt, and humans make bad prompts all the time because we suck, obviously. And it'll say, oh, well, I noticed you said that, and I'm assuming this is what you actually want. But if that's not what you want, just send me another prompt and we can work on that. We can change that, right? Because you run the risk otherwise of, I want to create a token with 8 decimals, 100 supply, and this is the treasure, like these really strict prompts. And unfortunately, that's even more work for the person than just doing it themselves at the end of the day. So through these human in the loop flows, the idea is that it should make your life easier when you're trying to do stuff, when you're trying to borrow, lend, swap, etc. It should be a lot faster than the current experiences that you have today. And this is where we kind of see the industry is going to head, where AI is essentially taking over every facet of our lives. We see it quite clearly. You go on Google, you get AI generated results. You go primarily to ChatGPT nowadays to ask basic queries. I'm sure that you've experienced this too, Brandon, the day-to-day basis. I'm definitely somebody who depends now more on AI than ever before. And I don't believe that in the future we will be going to websites. I don't believe we'll be going to many apps. I think we'll primarily be chatting through interfaces like ChatGPT for our use cases. And I think for Web3 applications, that's no different. And as that goes forward, the things that we have to think about are privacy, security, and also how keys work and how transactions work. Things will start moving faster than ever. And also that will create a new industry for criminals kind of to take advantage of. And it's important that when you're thinking about that, when you have these decentralized chat experiences, that they're decentralized and governed by actors that you can trust, like Hashgraph Online. With Hashgraph Online, We are a DAO-led organization with 10 companies behind us, leading organizations on Hedera. And behind that, we're built on Hedera itself, which is governed by 39 plus leading enterprise companies around the world. So there's a lot of trust that's built into these ecosystems. And as a spoiler alert, that trust doesn't just have to be on Hedera. What if we can utilize these decentralized registries outside of the Hedera ecosystem? What if you have an agent in a Web2 ecosystem or another Web3 ecosystem, and you can register it inside of OpenConvAI on Hedera? What if you can find and discover and chat to that agent immediately through peer-to-peer, governed by all these layers of trust? That's just a thought that I want to spin the wheel on. I don't have much that I can directly talk about, but it's something that we're interested in. So those are just some ideas. With the launch of Moonscape and where we're kind of heading with that, we are working with a lot of the teams that participated in the Hedera X AI hackathon, as well as the future upcoming hackathons. So we have the Origins hackathon that Hashgraph is organizing, and one of the tracks there is AI, which has a focus on the Hedera Agent Kit and OpenConvAI. And additionally, coming in August, there's the Hedera Africa Hackathon, which Hashgraph Online will be very much involved with, especially on the AI front.
Exciting stuff. Now, you're talking about some of those teams that you're working with. I know that AI is kind of working right alongside with the transactional Internet of Things, deep in space, and we have teams like CLSQ, YSAT, and Neuron. We also have people that are working directly in the AI governance space. EQTY Labs is a good example, Prove AI. What kind of teams are you working with, even if you can't talk about the direct partnerships right now, but what kind of teams are you working with, and what kind of partnerships do you think ConvAI and what you're working with can help?
That's a really great question. I have to be careful what I say. But I will say that at least we are working with the teams from the last Hedera X AI hackathon, Hedera AI Agents hackathon. So we're very closely talking with Frankie, for example, who we're super excited about. I don't know if you saw their demo. What they're creating is the ability for you to take your spare phone or your throwaway devices, computers, tablets, etc., and host an AI agent on it. And then not only do you host that AI agent on it, you earn tokens for doing that. So it's a really cool concept. They're building on Hedera, they're building on OpenConvAI, they're building on the AI infrastructure on Hedera itself to make these things happen. Additionally, we're working with an awesome team called Unthink AI. You might have also seen them through the various demos. What they're creating essentially is like, you're an influencer, right? And there's no way that you can talk to 1,000 people at the same time. So what if you can have an AI agent do that for you instead? What if the AI agent can handle all of your brand alignment stuff, make suggestions, and kind of work with these people on an individual level, just copying your personality and being trained on your data, what products you have to offer. And Tina, the founder of Unthink, will explain a little bit better than I can. But I think it's a really exciting use case. And it's something that's being paired with OpenConvAI as well, and the agent infrastructure. There's a number of other teams that are also building on Hedera, like Talent AI. They're with DYOR Blockchain. You might have heard of them. And they're creating essentially an agentic-led interview process. Right now, it's targeted towards Hedera developers, right? You go and do this interview as a developer, and you have to pass a certain metric, and it's assisted by AI. It's a really cool piece of functionality that plays into, again, Hedera's agentic infrastructure. So there's a lot of teams here that are building within the ecosystem, and we're only going to see that grow, I think, because Hedera just makes sense for AI, right? We have fixed transaction fees. They're very low cost, and they execute within 3 to 5 seconds. You don't get that combination on top of the fact that we have the Hedera consensus service, which doesn't exist anywhere else. It is the perfect breeding ground for things that are related to AI, where you have a lot of unstructured content, right? With typical blockchain mechanisms, you do very specific things, or you create a smart contract for it. But can you spin up a smart contract for every single little thing that you have to do? Whereas HCS is, I would say, quite flexible, maybe even fungible, where you can create these meta protocols like we have at Hashgraph Online to execute different needs. If you have things like verifiable training data, it makes a lot of sense to do it on Hedera because of the cost and the flexibility there, right? At the end of the day, we're creating these large language models, and we don't want to create a walled garden effect with those models. How do we trust them? How do we trust that data that they're trained on if it's not stored somewhere in a decentralized fashion?
Makes perfect sense. And it sounds like I'm going to have a lot more people to interview along the lines of AI. So the last thing that I want to get into is I've been covering Coinbase's X402 a fair amount. Does that have any impact on ConvAI or vice versa?
Not particularly. The way I kind of see it is 402 is this really cool standard and extends on HTTP headers. And historically, it was actually something that was raised a really long time ago. And it didn't go anywhere. And then Coinbase kind of saw this opportunity and was like, well, what if we actually use this header for something to facilitate payments, brokerage of payments, exchange of facilitators? It is a great mechanism for, especially for normies as well, to start interacting with blockchain and have those payments done through Coinbase or other facilitators. With OpenConvAI, we obviously have a means of doing transactions built into network through things like HIP991. And now through the transaction operation where you can, like I was showing the demo earlier, where you can send a transaction within the chat. What I see 402 as being potentially within OpenConvAI is an extension of the protocol where you can send a payment link using the 402 header. I don't know that it really changes much, but it could be a cool way to extend the protocol, if anything.
All right, fair enough. Congratulations on the launch of ConvAI and everything else you have going on. Michael, I love the way you present things, so you're always welcome back. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you, Brandon.
Always great to talk to Michael, and he's working really closely with the Hashgraph Association on their $1 million African hackathon, so I expect some really good stuff to come out on the AI front from that event. All right, with that, let's go ahead and jump into some network analysis. Like a broken record, no real change in throughput. When I looked at it, it was higher, but we're still at 10 transactions per second on average. Time to consensus finality is at 2.5 seconds. We had $1,600 in revenue this past week. We've been averaging between 400 and 500 hourly active users and added 27,000 accounts this week. Taking a look at the crypto and HBAR markets, Bitcoin is flat on the day, but up a few percent on the week, hovering around $107,000. HBAR is slightly up on both the day and the week, holding just above some support, currently at 14.5 cents. There's also stronger support at 12 cents. I think we may be entering summer doldrums, so I expect us to remain in a range between 12 and 22 cents until the alt ETFs start to get approved. If the first one, expected to be Solana, shows good results, I would think that all of the ones that have applications in would get a nice boost. And in turn, I'm hoping this kicks off alt season and the second leg of the bull run. Now, I'm not as big on conspiracy theories as I once was, but I do think there are participants out there that are kind of positioning themselves and doing things to suppress the altcoin market so they can establish their positions for this potential alt ETF season. Looking forward to next week. As I mentioned, we're going to be getting with Brady to have another DeFi corner. Obviously, there's tons of stuff going on there, so tune back in for that. We've also got interviews lined up with Circle of Games, IvyFi, and Shamba Records, so it's going to be some really good stuff there. As you noticed, we didn't have Shark Bites this week. Rob had some travel issues and couldn't hop on. We have plenty of questions in the backlog, so I'm not going to take any more questions right now, but if you do have any, keep those in the back of your mind and reply to my X posts with the next Shark Bites. That's all we have for this week. We'll see you next time around.